Welcome, everybody, to Insights in Action. Today, I'm joined by Mike of Plotlines. Mike, I would love to just start this morning off. First of all, how are you?
I am doing well. How about yourself?
I'm good. You're calling in from St. Louis, right?
I am, yes.
Has it gotten cold there yet?
It is about 80 degrees here, so it's unseasonably warm. Fall is my favorite season, and I'm hoping it gets a tiny bit chilly without going straight to winter.
Wow, man, San Diego has you beat. It's like 55 degrees here right now.
Yeah,
Well, cool. I'd love to just start off with just understanding a little bit more about yourself and your agency.
sure. Well, I have a journalism degree. I started my career working for a couple of PR firms and then ad agencies, which was great training ground because I learned how to have many bosses, work for multiple clients and industries, and most importantly, how to track my time and bill my time, which has been incredibly helpful. It was a painful learning process, but now that I'm used to it, it just comes naturally. So after that, I spent about 10 years at a large architecture firm called HOK. And that's where I really kind of gained a real appreciation for the value of storytelling and showcasing people in an industry that's not used to doing it. They're used to showcasing the building as sort of the ultimate prize and kind of ignoring or underplaying the team of people that actually helped make it come to fruition. So after that, I spent about 2 years at MasterCard, helping them kind of transition into more of a technology company. And then decided about 12 years ago to hang out my own shingle and start my own firm called Plotlines, which is a little bit of a clever wordplay on my last name, which is Plotnick. I'm not a huge fan of my last name, but I think it's a cool way of kind of incorporating it without sort of using it. And so what we do is we specialize in storytelling, which I know has become somewhat of a cliche nowadays. Everyone is talking about being a storyteller. And I will say, yeah, there's one thing to be a storyteller, but being an effective storyteller is another story. And that's what I specialize in. So I help my clients do that in a number of ways with traditional PR and publicity, which is my foundation, as well as all the new kind of obviously social media, digital tools, your own website and your own owned content, how to leverage all of that and connect with the people and the organizations that are most important to you.
Awesome. You said something in there that caught my attention. Could you help me out and anybody listening? What is the link between your history in architecture and storytelling?
Well, it's just because the industry itself has not or did not emphasize the story behind the building. Some of these buildings might have taken 2 or 3 years to come to fruition and get constructed. And yet they would wait until it was completely finished. Airbrush photos are available and then put it forth to try to get it published in an architectural trade publication or win an award. Nothing wrong with that. Those are noble pursuits, but they were ignoring or underestimating the importance of telling the story along the way. The process of the building come together, the challenges that the team had to overcome, maybe some kind of roadblocks, which were powerful stories, and kind of tell the process behind the building, essentially.
That's cool. Yeah, I think everybody, as they walk around, they look at buildings, but not too many people think about all the effort and everything that went into them. So that's a really cool way to think about that in your mind. It's kind of like that you've had this like innate desire to tell stories, and that's what the agency's built around too.
Yeah, and the fact is, we're all humans, and we love to hear and learn about other humans. So it's sort of like people have to be front and center, even if the story has nothing to do with the person per se. There are always opportunities to weave in a personal perspective through a quote or an insight or telling it from a person's perspective. It's like people need to be front and center.
Yeah, that's really cool. And so to talk about plot lines a little bit, I know that plot lines is focused on bringing compelling stories to life for strategic goals. How do you uncover these unique narratives within each business and ensure that the story aligns with their marketing and business objectives?
Well, obviously, I need to get to know my clients, who they are, what they do, what they aspire to do, the culture of that organization. And then I marry that with my background, which is in journalism, which is understanding in what the who, what, when, where, why, and how of news is, what makes something newsworthy to a traditional journalist. We can then leverage that and adapt that to other audiences. So we're not always working with trying to get something placed in a newspaper anymore. That may be part of our approach, but we might be trying to tell something on our own website or in a video or on a podcast or anything. So you use those same principles to try to kind of, what does the organization stand for and want to stand for? And what's newsworthy about that, or how can we make that newsworthy?
Wow, that's awesome. And to dive into that a little bit more, your agency, the work spans from everything from thought leadership to proposal narratives. How do you tailor your storytelling approach for different mediums, making sure that each piece resonates effectively with its intended audience?
Yeah, well, audience has to be first and front and center with any
Yeah.
marketing
Mhm.
tactic or strategy. It's defining the audience. The more clearly you can define who that person is or group is, what do they care about, what do they not care about, where do they hang out, kind of what are they looking for from you, what do they value in a potential partner. All of those questions, the more we can clearly define those, the better we are able to develop content that meets those needs and kind of resonates with the intended audience.
Wow. Okay, so would you say that it's really, I mean, would you say that it's mostly it's audience before medium? It's always
Yes.
looking at the audience first?
Yes, absolutely. Without question. I mean, you may have something in the back of your mind about, okay, I think this belongs here or there, and it may or may not be accurate, but so it's not, I don't think you can't, it's verboten to talk about or think about media, but I think the audience needs to be defined as clearly and compellingly as possible. So you know that you're going in the right place to connect with the right people.
Well, it just sort of makes sense even with like traditional marketing where you're creating an avatar and you're figuring out where they live and everything and then
Right.
you're marketing around that. So wow.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that you enjoy working with clients who understand their value but are open to new ideas. And I guess I'm curious, I mean, how do you help clients expand on their strengths and adapt their stories in a way that appeals to modern audiences?
Yeah, well, I mean, sometimes it's a process. I mean, depending on the client, certainly if someone has been doing the same thing at the same company for years and years and years, they may be less open or feel threatened or kind of, obviously I want the client to be the star and to look good. So I don't want to put them in any position where it's too risky or it ends up failing. So it's sort of finding that balance where they're comfortable enough, but I'm pushing them just enough to see, okay, let's test the water in this area. Pretty low risk, but let's see if it works. If it doesn't, no big deal. We can just adapt and move on. And that's the great thing about a lot of these tools is that many of them are free or very low cost. So it's sort of like, yeah, you don't want to do something that you later regret or goes viral for all the wrong reasons. But if you're smart and kind of careful, I think you can dip your toes in different areas and risk slightly and see what the reward might be.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always this unique challenge in creative and in branding and storytelling with clients where everybody sees it, I think, a certain way because we've been trained to, especially as business leaders. And it takes some outside firms like yours to be able to be like, well, have you thought about doing it this way? And I think that's what pushes marketing and creative forward, right?
Yeah, but I mean, ultimately, it's they're paying me, and it's their program. So you need to learn how to push so far, and it's sort of
Yeah.
like if they're not open to it, that's fine. It doesn't mean I'm going to give up, but I'm certainly not going to kind of force them to do something they're not comfortable doing.
Yeah. And so the move from working within a single company to advising multiple clients, I'm sure brings unique challenges. What are some of the biggest lessons you've learned in transitioning from an in-house role to an external consultant, particularly in establishing trust with clients?
Yeah, well, I mean, trust is so important, especially in today's world where we're not sure what to believe or who to trust, and that's one of the downsides of sort of this democratized media landscape that we now live in is we don't know who to trust. There's no Walter Cronkite giving us the evening news. There's no sort of single newspaper that we can trust. So I think that translates to working with clients as well. They need to trust me. They need to trust me that I've got their best interest in mind, that I know what I'm doing. And ultimately, we're going to be successful together. I think going back to my introduction, having the background in working at an agency or actually several agencies trained me early to work with many different clients and have different bosses and understand different industries and just enough to be dangerous, no, to be successful without having to dive in kind of and consume yourself with one client and learn as much as you possibly can.
Yeah. I know that there's this new saying, and it seems to ring true that attention is the new currency. But do you feel like attention sometimes, like people exploiting attention sometimes comes at the cost of trust? And if so, how do you balance between both of those two things?
Yeah, that's a big question. I'm not sure I have a phenomenal answer to it, but I agree with you completely. Attention in today's noisy world where we're getting bombarded by so many different types of media constantly, and we all carry around our own sort of like mini computer in our hands at every moment. We have Apple Watches and kind of multiple screens, and but it's just it being able to carve through and gain attention is sort of the goal, and it's not always easy. I think it's important to always be sincere and authentic about what you're saying. I'm not a big fan of gimmicks and using things that are sort of clickbait, which can be effective at getting eyeballs, but ultimately building trust, not so much. So, sort of, I always try to counsel my clients. It's not about raw number of clicks or opens or fans or friends or follows. It's not. I mean, yes, we want to track that, but that's not the most important kind of measure of whether you're being successful. If you break through to one person, but that person's going to give you a $3 million account, well, I'd say that would be a success. So it's not about sheer numbers. It's about breaking through to the right person at the right time with the right message. And that means understanding who you're trying to break through to and being very thoughtful and precise about how you're going to connect with them.
Well, that's a really good way to look at it. It's really about authenticity, and I think that that's that the world is changing so fast, and it's specifically when it comes to AI. When I know that with the rise of generative AI, you're interested a little bit in discussing the continued importance of human writing. In what ways do you see human-driven storytelling maintaining its value in an increasingly automated world?
Yeah, well, of course, everyone is talking and kind of wringing their hands about what does AI mean? It's anywhere from it's a complete waste of time and money to it's going to take all our jobs and wipe out humanity. And I fall somewhere between those two poles. I do use it and it is helpful, but I continue to believe that human storytelling it should be and is most effectively done by humans. And my clients hire me. They don't hire me to use an AI tool to tell their stories. And I like to think of AI, at least in its current iteration of my experience, it's like a skilled intern, someone that you bring in that's maybe very smart, top of their class, but they join your organization and they're not ready to hit the ground running. You need to kind of supervise them pretty closely and not let them just kind of do their own thing. So I use AI as a thought starter to give me another perspective when I'm in some level of writer's block, like help me with this, tell me a different way of phrasing this word or this phrase. That all of that's very helpful and kind of getting you off the dime, but that's far from just exporting all of my creative work and thought to a computer and to a machine. And I don't think that that's my hope is that never happens because I think we lose a lot, not to mention the ethical issues, the privacy concerns, the inaccuracies. I just recently sort of had a journalist ask me about economic issues in a certain city that I'm not from. So I put it in the AI and it came back with stuff that sounded phenomenal. It's like, great. Oh my gosh, this is like piece of cake. Then I did some more digging and a lot of it was inaccurate. It was either the wrong time. I mean, it was like all of it needed to be vetted. Ultimately, what I put forth is essentially, it was the seed of what the AI gave me, which again, got me off a dime, but it's not locked and loaded, ready to go by any means.
Yeah. Yeah. I would look at it as this thing that it can't replace what you do. It can just make you more efficient. It's never going to be this thing that's going to replace completely what you do. It's going to need the human touch, especially when it comes to writing and storytelling. I think the way that you use it is the best way to use it as a thought starter, somewhere to get you out of a rut a little bit if you are in one in terms of writing or your creative process. But if you're asking it to completely do everything for you, I think that we can easily tell when something's written with AI versus when something's authentic and handmade by a human.
Yeah, I mean, the sad or scary part about it is that not a whole lot of people necessarily can tell or know enough about good writing to say, okay, this was, so it's like, I'm concerned about the marketing teams and the internal communications teams that just sort of see it as an easy way to do their job, the part of their job they don't like to do, which is writing. A lot of people don't like to do writing. It's hard. Writing is hard. And I've been doing it for my entire career. I still tell you it's very hard. Never gets easy. I think you get better at it, but it's a tough thing. So to be able to say, okay, I'm not going to, I don't want to do this. I'll have a machine do it. And then basically not know, okay, what you're missing, what have you lost,
Yeah.
what is incorrect, what is unethical, how have you kind of, what risks have you brought into your organization by sharing the important information on the kind of on the internet. So anyway, there's lots of concerns, and I hope that there are some guardrails, and I hope to and plan to continue to use it as it continues to get more sophisticated. But I'm not planning to be replaced by it anytime soon.
You know. And Mike, given that Plotline offers this broad array of content services, anywhere from PR to proposals, how do you view collaboration with other agencies to bring in additional expertise or perspectives to complex projects that sometimes require that multifaceted approach?
Yeah, I'm all about collaboration. I bring in folks all the time. I'm primarily a writer, but I doesn't mean I can write everything well. So I might bring in a different kind of writer. I might bring in a videographer. If a client is working on a video, I might bring in a branding consultant. If, they're looking for a branding program, a couple clients, I just share that because there's only so much that one person can do. So we kind of share the account. So I'm all about collaboration. So it's more of a virtual agency where I bring in the partner that makes sense and works for that particular client versus trying to sell whoever happens to be sitting in my office.
Yeah, that's cool. So you really take this like almost consultative approach to it where you understand the client very well and you're like, this is exactly who they need. And I think that's where that relationship piece comes in the agency world.
Yeah, and I think that's where my value is. It's sort of
Yeah.
like, okay, you're hiring me because I've been doing this for a while. I know what I'm doing, and I'm not going anywhere. With a lot of agencies, there's a revolving door. There's sort of like a face person who is very charismatic, but you never see again, or it plays a very small role and they bring in some junior person to do most of the work. You've probably heard of many of the tropes, many of which are true about some traditional agencies. And it's sort of like, and that doesn't work for a lot of organizations, and understandably so. I provide an alternative.
Yeah, that's awesome. And in your experience developing compelling stories for, I know, various organizations, what elements do you believe are essential for crafting a narrative that not only engages, but also drives action?
Yeah, well, I mentioned first, people need to be front and center, even if they're not, it's not told with a people first kind of narrative. The second thing is conflict. Every good story has conflict. So companies often don't want to talk about the conflict because they want to think everything was great. This 3-year project was perfect. Client loved us every single time. I mean, anyone who's ever worked on a project of that length knows that that is completely erroneous. So you got to weave in conflict, sort of what happened, how did you get derailed or off track, and then how did you solve that or get back on track? So the conflict is important, and I think it's important also to show, don't tell. That's a sort of a mantra that I learned very early in journalism school. Even though you're using words, you use words in a way that you're painting a picture. Even if you're using wonderful imagery to support whatever you're sharing, act as if you're not. It's like sort of like I take cues from really good feature writers at the Wall Street Journal and New York Times, and I mean they're phenomenal writers. Not even novelists. I mean, we're not writing the great American novel in most cases, but you can take lots of cues from what they do to keep readers interested and compelled.
Yeah. That's awesome. If you see it in movies, and books that are out, there's always the hero's journey where the hero is faced with some conflict. And you're right. A lot of companies don't like to include that conflict because they don't want that chink in their armor. But it comes at the cost of people not being able to relate to their brand because they don't have that conflict, because people don't relate to somebody that's perfect. They relate to somebody who has imperfections, right?
Yeah, and anyone who's lived through working with, I mean, we're people where we have conflict. I mean, it's just the nature. Anyone who's been married or even has a friend, there's always conflict of some things. That's what makes us humans.
Yeah. Well, Mike, this has been fantastic. I think even myself, I've learned a lot about the creative process and writing. And it's really interesting to hear your journey, which is coming from a lot of different experiences that all seem to lead to something that you love to do, which is writing. Where can people find out more about you? Where can people find out more about your agency?
Sure. Well, my website is elevateyourstory.com, just like
Okay.
it sounds. I'm also on LinkedIn, Mike Plotnick. You can find me there. I'm on X, Twitter, but I'm not very active there. I'm on Facebook as well. But yeah, look me up. I'd love to connect with any of your listeners.
Sounds good. And I'll have all those links down in the show notes below so you guys can connect with Mike. Mike, thank you again so much for being on. This is awesome.
Great talking to you. Thank you.
Thanks.